Welcome to EDO Breakthrough, the podcast where we tackle economic development challenges head on. From small towns to bustling cities, every place has its own hurdles to overcome. The EDO Breakthrough podcast creates an environment of collaboration, innovation, and understanding where we can share our real-life challenges and brainstorm solutions. I'm your host, Sandy Dubé, a certified economic developer and founder of PPR Strategies. Each week, we'll be welcoming a different, brilliant, place-based mind to talk through real-life economic development challenges that have been shared with us by you, our gracious listeners. Zach, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for having me today. I'm super glad to be here.
Great. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about your background and your journey, who you are, where you work now, things like that?
Yes, ma'am, of course. I went to Florida State University, graduated in 2015 with a bachelor's in finance and real estate as well, with a minor in hospitality. Then after that, I entered the car business against my better judgment, which I would not wish on my worst enemy. But it was very interesting and I learned a lot. I was an internet sales manager there in marketing. I was in the finance office for a while and also ended up as a general sales manager of a location before I left there. I was in that business for probably around 4 years. Left there, went to Envision Credit Union where I learned a lot. I was there for a very short time. I was a branch operations supervisor there. And then I got a call one day, just like most of us do that get involved in economic development just out of nowhere. We have no idea what it really is. I was just told, hey, I think you'd be good for this position. We think your personality would be great for it. So Jackson County was looking for an economic developer. And I said, okay, sounds great. It sounds just like me. So I went and interviewed, had no idea what I was doing, got the job. And I was there for almost right at 4 years before I transitioned into my current role in January at Florida SBDC at UWF.
Wow, I love that. I do want to dive in a little bit on some of that hospitality education. I thought that was really interesting. I always say that some of these skills I can't teach. I can't teach customer service. I know some people can, but either you've got that element in your personality or you don't. And so I think that that's kind of an interesting thread I'd like to pull on in a minute. That sounds fun. But one of the questions that we keep getting asked is this transition from one job to another. And I know when you and I first connected, you were with Jackson County, as you said, and now, with the Small Business Development Center. Any thoughts or advice? Can you talk a little bit about that transition from traditional county economic development to working as a partner and maybe more directly with your small business community or just differently? Can you talk about that transition?
I will say initially it was a shock because I was so used to working with large scale projects, large scale economic development where it could take, anywhere from a year to, you even see some of these projects taking 10 to 15 years to land right in these communities, but they have a massive impact. You're working with projects anywhere from 50 jobs, maybe up to 4,000 jobs, or at least, submitting on those. And up to, 1 to 2 billion in capital investment, which is a massive impact in a small community like, mine at the time, Jackson County. We have less than 50,000 people. And I hate to say it, but almost 8,000 of those are incarcerated. So when you look at the numbers, it doesn't tell the whole story. But the transition from that to small businesses was definitely interesting. It was hard for me to get out of my head for the first couple of months. The side of we're competing hard, right, for this project to, okay, now I'm kind of more relaxed. This person needs business assistance. We're offering no cost consulting to this business. And they might be an entrepreneur just needing a business plan or some financial projections to help them get started, as opposed to a company who might have been in business for 100 years and all they're needing is to know if they can find a location and what kind of incentives they can get from you as a local community and as a state.
Yeah, very different. And I would assume different people are driven by different tasks and activities that they might be suited for. You seem to speak passionately about the small businesses. How has this transition been for you?
It's actually been good. It has made me way more well rounded as a person and professionally. There are aspects of business that I'd never realized before working with these larger businesses that, like I said, have been in business for a long time. Some of them were startups, but we didn't really handle that aspect of them. At least I didn't, because I just didn't have the knowledge base. Now that I've been with SBDC for a little over 7 months, almost 8 months, I have learned so much. I've learned how to write a business plan, do financial projections. We work on marketing plans. We help them with market growth. It's just a whole plethora of things that I never even realized. I mean, I guess I did realize, but I had never dove into, right? And didn't realize existed because it was a whole different world. And the other thing is, as an economic developer, I actually did not know exactly what SBDC did. And it was an injustice to myself and to the community that I serve. And so that's one thing since I took over, I've used my connections and my relationships to continue to build on that and tell everybody, hey, listen, I know you don't know what SBDC is fully, but I want you to know because I need to be here as a resource for you. Because as an economic developer, you do not have the time to hold someone's hand through the whole process, especially every person from your community that wants to start a small business as a one-man team or even as a 2, 3, 4, 5-man team. You don't have that time.
I applaud you for admitting that you didn't know something. That can be really tricky sometimes. And yes, to know who your SBDC rep was when you were in county government is one thing, but to fully understand the breadth of the services and the resources that they can provide and have access to is much more detailed, much more nuanced. So
Definitely.
it's interesting. You were still in the same general region, is that right?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. I'm actually from Jackson County originally, or from the majority of my life. My family's from around this area. So I live right outside of Marietta, Florida. And my office is actually here. So they hired me originally to be under the PCB office, which is Panama City Beach office. But the plan was for me to be there 3 days out of the week. And then it transitioned to, okay, well, we'll have you go maybe 2 days a week since you live in Marietta. And then it transitioned to, all right, once a week. And then now I go down maybe once a month, if that, because they want me in these rural communities and they have not been touched that much, especially in the recent years. I had a meeting about 2 weeks ago with a small local credit union in one of our communities here. And to be honest with you, most of them had never even heard of SBDC or what we do. And I explained it to them and they're like, oh my gosh, this is a resource that if we would have had access to, there's no telling what the implications could have been on our loans, on our clients that we serve. And so it's a huge thing. And in the last 2 weeks, they've sent me multiple clients already to help with. So I'm super excited about, all the connections that we're building in the local areas and these rural communities.
That's great. One of the things that, kind of advice that I always give is to talk about not burning bridges. And, whether you are moving to a job in the same community or a neighboring or within the region, the economic development space is small. So, and even community and states, I don't care where you are, it is still pretty small.
Oh, totally. And this is kind of where I do want to plug. Like, I have been involved in a lot of boards throughout my last few years, and get involved. That's all I have to say is get involved, be involved, stay involved. Always take the chance to meet someone new. You never know what you can bring to the table for them or they can bring to the table for you. And you never know when you're going to make a new friend in a lasting relationship. I've been very blessed and fortunate to serve on the FEDC, the Florida Economic Development Council Board, the Southern Economic Development Council Board I'm currently serving on. And I've never served on the International Economic Development Council Board, but I do serve currently as chair of one of their committees of the Emerging Leaders Committee. And I'll be honest, it has paid off so much, not just for me and my relationships, but the other folks that are involved. And, that's the thing. You have to stay plugged in. You have to keep yourself involved. If not, you're going to get behind, and you're doing yourself and your community an injustice to not be hearing what everyone else is doing that's successful.
Well, that IEDC Emerging Leaders Committee was how you and I, kind of really brought this relationship together. And what I loved about you and several others on that call, because I am not an emerging leader, but I have emerged. I don't know. I'm on the other side. I've been doing this for a minute. So, a distinguished leader. Thank you. But I appreciate cameras on. I can't stand cameras off on Zoom. I can't do it. We are in too much of a relationship business, and I realize that there's a time and a place, and we don't all have the luxury, technology issues or whatever. But to establish real connections, this is important. I want to see your face. I want to see your facial expressions. I want to have a full conversation. So
Totally. I agree. And I work with clients, every day, and most of them are over Zoom or on a phone call or something. And when we do have Zoom, I'm the same way. I love for them to be on camera because I want to know how they feel about something I say or how they feel about something they say, see how genuine they are. And I want them to see how genuine I am and how excited I get and they get about the opportunity that they're discussing. So it means a lot to me. And relationships, like you said, is the name of the game in economic development. I don't care what level of economic development you're in, relationships, relationships, relationships.
I love that. I actually recently wrote a blog about the importance of relationships and, some really long-term, beautiful relationships that have been really nice. So, yes, actually, I'll link that in the show notes here. So I want to shift a little bit and talk about some of the business challenges that you're hearing out in the world today. I am admittedly a small business owner. We get to work with economic development and tourism and workforce development based organizations. So my lens as an entrepreneur is different, but I'm curious what you're hearing as some of the challenges that businesses are having these days.
Well, I could list a million, right? There's a ton of challenges, but the main challenges that come up are like cash flow issues, access to capital, employee retention. And I hate to say it, employee retention is one of the biggest ones. You've got people, especially in Florida now with the minimum wage changing. It really levels the playing field. It also is killing small businesses. I mean, small businesses, paying $15 an hour where, 4 to 5 years prior, they're paying 8 something an hour. That kills your cash flow, right? And of course, that's what we're here to do. We're here to help with cash flow and help access to capital as SBDC. And so we have a lot of focus on that, whether it's startup businesses, entrepreneurs, small to medium enterprise businesses. Everybody is having issues. Even, I hate to say it, we've talked to some lenders recently, and they're having an issue with capital. They can't even loan the money they want to because they're having such capital restraints, right? Because people move their money around so often and constantly because of the way the rates are. And, it's the same, I hate to say it, it's the same way as with employees. They'll leave one job for another for 25 cents an hour. They'll drive 30 minutes farther each way, but leave for 25 cents an hour. So net, they're losing money and losing time. But they don't look at the bottom line. They just look at the big flashy, oh, this is what I'm getting paid gross, right? And so those are things you have to think about as an employee and as a business. How competitive do you want to be? But employee retention, I would say, is one of the main ones. But I want to say this. It all goes back to lack of preparation, not the employee retention necessarily, but any of the other issues. A lot of it goes back to lack of preparation, like cash flow issues, access to capital, growth issues, whether it's growing too slow or growing too fast. It's all a lack of preparation in my world. It seems to be anyway. I mean, that's why a business plan as a startup or as an entrepreneur is such a big deal, right? You've got to lay it all out, discuss it, think about it, figure out exactly what you want. Like also another thing is exit strategy that I'm seeing a lot of recently. When you start a business, you have to think about like, what do I want to do in 15 years, right? What do I just want to shut the business down? Do I want to give it to, hand it over to one of my kids or to another family member, or do I want to sell it? And those are things you have to think about early on. Unfortunately, in the world that we live in the rapid pace that business moves, those are things that have to be thought of prior to even opening a lot of times. And again, I just think lack of preparation, be involved in the decisions made every day as a business owner. Make sure that you're doing what's right with your customers or clients, and make sure you're doing what's right by your employees too. Again, and I think that's a big part of employee retention. Most of the time, employees do not leave because of money. Even though they might say that, it's usually because of the atmosphere of their business or where they're working.
What advice would you give economic developers now that you've kind of heard these thoughts and these challenges from the small businesses? What advice would you give the economic developers that are listening and your colleagues and on that side of the aisle? How can they help? What could they be doing?
I would tell them the same thing. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Make sure that you have the resources handy to help these businesses, right? And SBDC is one of them. Make sure you're close. Relationships, make sure you're close with your local SBDC, your local governments, your state governments, anyone that you can have in your back pocket or in your toolkit, put them there, and let them know that you're there for them too if they need it. I definitely think that your local EDOs struggle, especially smaller EDOs. And that's where you're like, okay, how can we be better? Use your resources. Don't be like me. Don't not know what your local SBDC does really. Know what they do. Know what your regional organizations do. Regionalism, that's huge to me. Especially when you're a smaller community, you have got to utilize your regional organizations.
Cool. I love it. It was interesting. One of the things that I was thinking about from a small business owner perspective also maybe is asking for help. And sometimes that's tough, but it's so necessary. And I think on the flip side, maybe for that economic development or what you're doing now in this SBDC role is to offer help. Sometimes people have a really hard time asking for it because they don't know that somebody is out there willing to help them and knows what to do and can help connect them, point them in the right direction. You might not be the solution, but your Rolodex, so to speak, might be able to lend a helping hand.
Oh, definitely. And I would say to those business owners, do not be fearful. What is the number one thing that keeps us from being successful? Fear. I don't care how stupid you think a question is. It's not stupid. What is stupid is not asking the right questions and then your business failing because you were too scared to do something about it.
I love that. Okay, so speaking of fear, see my transition there?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Gosh. So I was thinking one of the other questions that our listeners have been really interested in is AI and marketing trends and, trying something new and things like that. And I just wanted to talk with you a minute. Obviously, I've got thoughts, and you and I've kind of alluded to this in previous conversations, is this idea of staying current. But what are you seeing in terms of trends in this economic development and business support space? Or do you have specific thoughts on leaning in on AI?
Well, I would say probably the best idea is make sure that you're current on the trends, right? Read articles, listen to podcasts like this, right? Watch whatever you can. Talk to other EDOs, see what they're doing. AI is scary. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm scared of it. We talked about fear. You dang right. I'm fearful of it because I have no idea what the end game is for AI moving forward. A lot of people are concerned about, taking jobs, right? And it does replace certain jobs, but maybe it replaces them and they actually can create more high wage jobs, right? I don't know. That's where it's going to, but that just means our people need to be more educated, right? And we need to help those businesses find higher educated folks for those positions. But yes, AI is scary. I personally am just still dipping my toe in the water. And I think that that's kind of the approach that we need to have. Like, we need to be maybe not scared, just be concerned and jump into it, utilize it, but don't fully rely on it, right? We don't want to be totally reliable on it. And the other thing is, no matter where AI goes, it is still, economic development is still all about relationships, like we've already mentioned a couple of times. So just make sure that you're still face to face, you're still seeing people, you're still going out to see site selectors, you're in front of them, having marketing campaigns, keeping your community updated as well. I mean, you need to keep your community updated on what they can do to help and what you're doing constantly.
Ah, I love that so much. Yes, I agree. It's kind of, enter cautiously, but to not let it be the end all be all in what you're doing. But yeah, we talk about AI every single day in the office and, what to do, new tools, trying new things. Oh my gosh, that's scary. Whoa, big brother. I don't even know, all the things, but it's kind of interesting. But I think that your nugget here about educating the community, one of the things that I've been saying for years is that economic development is a community's best kept secret, and it shouldn't be. If you know, you know, and it just shouldn't be like that. But it's so hard, particularly in small communities when there might be, rural communities might be a 1 or 2 person office or even a 10 person office, like the percentages, like it's just, based on population, it's still really hard to connect and reach your community. And reach everybody that needs to know about. But I'm curious your thoughts on maybe how to connect with stakeholders, legislatures, people that are in funding, decision-making authority, things like that. How do we get them to understand the importance of economic development?
Well, and I want to go back to you saying it's our best kept secret because it's true and it shouldn't be that way. I mean, just because we have to keep certain projects secret does not mean that we need to keep the EDOs secret in what we're doing.
You're right.
I mean, we have a huge impact on communities, right? In our region, our state, our nation. We need to explain to our communities and our stakeholders exactly what we're doing, exactly how it benefits them, and tell them how they can be involved. Because when they see how they can be involved, it will make a world of difference. One thing that I used to tell residents all the time is, hey, listen, I understand how you feel about this restaurant or this or that. But when someone that you don't know asks you when you're sitting at a restaurant and they ask you about how you like the community, do not dog us. Because guess what? That could be a site selector. That could be the president of a Fortune 500 company looking to relocate to Jackson County or to whatever community that you're in. And guess what? If you dog them, they're done. They're not even looking any farther. They're gone. They're going to the next community.
Yeah, what great advice. You're right. And that makes everybody kind of an important player. The other thing that you will often hear me say is that you can't do business attraction until you've locked in your business retention and you've got that really, local, and you just explained it so beautifully, understanding the value of somebody sitting there, on a bar stool at a restaurant, talking with a stranger. What is that conversation like? And, yeah, it could be a visitor, could be anybody, but you need to make sure that you're educating and, helping your residents to understand the impact and the return on the investment for economic development.
Totally. It has a huge impact. And also, if you don't mind, I'd like to make a comment about legislature, as well, and your elected officials. I think as a local EDO, you need to be at the Capitol. You need to speak to your legislatures. You need to speak to your locally elected leaders. And I think that it's not a bad idea to have local classes for your leaders and statewide or regional classes for your leaders as well. We're fortunate. We're only a little over an hour from Tallahassee, so we can be over there all the time, or we could when I was at the EDO. And we were constantly in front of them. And if you're not, you're forgotten.
Wow. So we started out at the beginning talking about the relationships with peers and networks and business owners and bankers in your community, other, service providers, and now, yeah, your local and state elected officials and federal elected officials, just to understand the power of you and your organization. I know it can be challenging oftentimes for economic developers to tell their story. Y'all want to tell the story of other people and, the businesses and their successes, but they need to ultimately understand your impact as an economic developer and how you are there to help many. So, I always say, like, it's one economic developer helping many businesses. And that is really important. And you're not going to be able to do that work unless you are supported financially and with legislative backing in all of the areas.
Oh, totally. And, we've had a very unique experience in Florida, and I won't get into it into detail, but it's been very difficult the last few years in Florida, a lack of incentives. And we really just need to keep pushing forward, and not just for Florida, but any state. Even if it seems like they're approving incentives, the incentive pot is growing, still be there and let them know, hey, I appreciate this. You don't know how much we appreciate this. Look at the impact that your decision has made on our community. If you tell them and show them how they're making a difference in your life and your community's life, the impact is insurmountable. They're going to keep pushing for you.
Yeah. Well, before I ask my final question, any final words you'd like to share, Zach?
Hey, I think just keep pushing through. If you're an EDO, do your best, use your resources, good luck, and educate all your stakeholders. That's all I can say. And I wish you luck. If you ever have any questions, please reach out. I'll be glad to help in any way possible.
Okay, so my final question is, what has led to one of your career breakthroughs? As we talk about this EDO Breakthrough podcast, can you think of a career breakthrough or a personal breakthrough that you've had that you'd like to share?
Of course. That first initial call when I was at Envision Credit Union about Jackson EDC and the position, again, I had no idea what it was, what I would be getting myself into. And it's one of the best professional decisions I've ever made, because I found that I have a passion for economic development that I never knew I had, right? When I was growing up, everybody, they're like, I want to get out of this town. I want to get out of here, go to a big city, make a bunch of money. And it always resonated with me. And I'm like, I don't want to go. I'll go get my education, and I'm coming back. I love this place, right? It has so much to offer that a big city does not, And when I got back, I realized, like, man, the career opportunities are just so lacking. And so I'm having to drive, at certain times to Dothan, Alabama, an hour for my job, or then to Chattahoochee, 35 minutes away for a job, and which is really not that far in terms, if you think of a big city, you drive that far every day. But it's just tough because the careers are so lacking compared to large cities and large metropolitan areas. And so when I realized what it was, I dove in head first, and I'm like, man, this is what God made me for, right? This is one thing here that is my purpose. And I want to continue to work in economic development, no matter where my career takes me, even if it's just volunteering. I want to be involved in economic development because I think it's huge. I want my children and my grandchildren to always have an opportunity here. If they decide to leave, that's on them. That's their choice. But I don't want them to be forced to leave because they can't find a job.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's beautiful. And thank you for being with us today. I am sure that everybody really enjoyed listening to you and listening to your stories and hearing this conversation. In the show notes, we will have details on LinkedIn and your website and email, where to find you, things like that if they want to connect. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandy.
The EDO Breakthrough podcast is brought to you by PPR Strategies. PPR Strategies, standing for People and Places Reimagined, is a strategic consulting firm working specifically with EDOs and other place-based organizations. We share the unique stories of communities through communication, strategic planning, marketing, media relations, and more. Visit us at pprstrategies.com and find our contact information in the show notes. I'd like to give a big thank you to you for listening. Remember, together we are unstoppable.